You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next half an hour, we're going to be doing a sort of news roundup. We're going to be talking about animation versus AI, really, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm Matt.
Hi, I'm Dylan.
Hi, I'm John.
So this week, the BBC's got itself into it's got itself into sort of the territory of people moaning about stuff without thinking about it. Is that what it is over the AI generated promotional text thing? So I think we should probably talk about that a little bit, but also Ian Levine's posted his, or got somebody to post his, or the first episode of his animated Daleks Master Plan thing. Well, we'll get down to whether it's animated or not in a minute. Onto YouTube, where his trailer for The Massacre also resides. And then, of course, we're getting closer now to the Celestial Toymaker's release, which is also slightly controversial. And one of us at least has seen it. John? Dylan, did you see it too?
I only saw episode 3.
Really?
For various reasons.
Okay, we'll get down to that. But I suppose the majority of this evening's conversation will be AI versus animation, Ian Levine versus the BBC, whatever. And I don't propose to make this a bitch fest, which probably will mean we'll get less views on YouTube, right? Because if we dug into that end of it, no doubt we'd have the kind of views that all these sort of gammony non-fan fans tend to get on YouTube. Instead, we'll try and have a reasonable conversation about it. But let's just this is a bit of a subject that Matt always seems interested in. So Matt, I want to come to you first, not the animation part, the generative AI part, because
so I'm worried about AI. I think AI runs the risk of putting people out of jobs and replacing skilled designers, photographers, a whole industry. Particularly as I run a digital marketing agency and I build websites for people and we design websites and various other things. AI will get to the point where you just write, can you build me a website for a chocolate shop, please? And it will build you a completely original, fairly reasonable website.
With 6 fingers.
Yeah, which means that potentially I'd be screwed for my living. So I am worried about it. But it's here and it exists and it's not going to go anywhere. So my view is trying to work with it, trying to use it to, in my professional life, trying to use it to do the boring stuff and to fill in the gaps and to write stuff that I don't want to write. But in Doctor Who, I think it's a creative thing. So people are allergic to AI when it comes to anything to do with creativity. And I think people see Doctor Who as a whole as being a creative endeavor. But this particular use of AI, as far as I can tell...
we should say what it is, now that we're like 2.5 minutes into your...
Well, this is what... I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think what it is they're using AI not to write promotional copy, but to produce variations of human-written promotional copy that they can then... split test on the internet, so they can judge which blocks of copy work the best using click rates and various other things. And that's literally just rewriting someone's handwritten copy from...
I suspect it's search engine optimized, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but you'd hope it would all be search engine optimized. I think this is literally, the act of producing a variation would be search engine optimization, because then you get something that looks different to search engines, even though it says exactly the same thing. So it's not a vast creative, and they're not going to, at the moment, start making episodes of Doctor Who using AI. RTD isn't turning to AI, and I'm writing a story at the moment, and I've actually tried using AI to see what happens next in my story by just pasting the story that I've written and saying, how does Sergeant Benton get out of this one? And it's rubbish. It's like a child right here. Sergeant Benton takes the screwdriver out of his pocket that we didn't know about, unbolts this and does this. So at the moment, AI...
on that point, to be fair, our episode on it hasn't gone out yet. but will go out in a couple of weeks, where we asked AI to talk about Russell T Davies's tropes, and it basically came back with generic Doctor Who tropes under the name of Russell T Davies. So it didn't really succeed at that either, did it?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, but at the moment it does that. So so I am worried, but I'm not. Twitter seems to go into a complete meltdown at anything involving the words AI, because Twitter in general, not everybody, but Twitter in general, seems to think, well, I'm boycotting Doctor Who now because it's using AI. And same with Marvel's Secret Invasion. There are problems with Marvel's Secret Invasion, but for me, the title sequence that they used AI for, and were open about using AI for, and they used it in a way that matched the themes of the series, was the perfect use of AI for a title sequence. And one last thing, the fact that we know that the BBC is using this for promotional copy is because the BBC announced it, because it's an experiment. The BBC are being transparent about using AI and open about using AI, and that's the only way we're going to ethically use AI in the future, is if organisations like the BBC are open about it, transparent about it. They allow their staff to comment on it and approve it, and say if it's treading on their toes, which they said they were in the statement. So the fact that we know all this means that the BBC is spearheading proper use of AI, good use of AI. So it should be, it's a thing to praise the BBC for, not to condemn it for turning to whatever Satan's autocorrect is how I put it in the last episode. So I'll just repeat the joke. I
guess one of the things that AI can do in situations like that, especially I guess around promotional things rather than purely creative things, is come up with alternate ideas. Because if you've got somebody, let's just say, for example, you've got somebody who every week makes a poster for Doctor Who. After about 6 weeks, they're bound to start repeating themselves. Now, if you've got AI involved and said, AI, you'd come up with a poster, then the poster the AI came up with would probably be rubbish. But that might give then the original artist an idea to do something new instead of just repeating themselves. Yeah. So I've boiled that down to a very, very, very simplified example. But AI is something that you can use as a tool in the workplace, is what I guess I'm saying. Dylan, as somebody who works in that workplace, what are your feelings on all of this?
There's huge conversations at the moment about AI and its uses in television and film, and that was a big thing behind the writer strikes, of what happens with not just digital likenesses but scripts that AI might come up with, and the sort of outcome was favourable to the humans, not to Skynet. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, and it poses a very real threat, as Matt says. This isn't it. As you say, they've been very open about what it is, and I can only echo everybody else's sentiments of it's a tool that I think can benefit us all if used correctly, but there's huge discussions in terms of legislation and things like that about how it can be used, when it can be used, that I think will be ongoing for the next decade as AI progresses.
Yeah, it's what you feed AI is one of the controversial bits, isn't it? But also, this is the other side of the BBC thing, is it said awkwardly, I think, Doctor Who thematically lends itself to AI, which I don't think is true, and I think that's an awkward thing. But Doctor Who does lend itself to AI because of the amount of BBC-owned material, like moving images, scripts, that the BBC can feed, presumably, into AI, and then it will produce. So you ask AI to give examples from the history of Doctor Who for this, and this, and it will just and you'll get copy out of it, or design, if you think visually. There's a lot of material in Doctor Who that it can draw on.
In a couple of weeks, and this is outside of the Doctor Who conversation, but it's connected with the AI, the remake of Roadhouse is coming out, which is by Doug Liman, one of my favourite directors, and it's on Netflix. But it also, apparently, controversially, there's rumours that because some of it was being refilmed, they did reshoots during the writer's strike, and apparently the studio, according to these rumours, used AI generated text for the scripts for the reshoots or something. We don't know what. We'll dig into it, but I think, are going to come back and review that and that'll be an interesting conversation as a sort of addendum to this one. John, as somebody who writes books as opposed to a book about the creative process in Doctor Who, sorry Matt, I just had to throw that in there.
Did I mention I'm writing about Sergeant Benton at the moment? he's just got to the secret chamber underneath the base on the Yorkshire moors. That's
John, any
Is
more
there a demon
thoughts?
there?
Any more thoughts before we move on and talk about the animated stuff?
I think the important thing is it's the BBC marketing department that's doing this, not Doctor Who. And I, much as Russell T Davies might be over so much of it, there's no way they're going to be talking to BBC marketing department about that. So I think AI is a long way off the point where it's going to take you to something that that passes for something written by a human, because it's only as good as the text it draws on at the moment, and it's your AI engines aren't going to have an infinite amount of text fed into them, nowhere near that yet.
In fact, the biggest problem that people have started to notice about AI is that it's unable to distinguish between the truth, between parody and pastiche, and between outright lies. And so you ask AI a question, and the chances are it's going to come back with absolute bullshit, or else it's going to come back with something that is just literally humorous, but it doesn't realize it's being humorous. And so AI at the moment,
Did you see the one the other week? I think someone was feeding into Chat GPT or whatever, and it came back with, "Why the hell are you making me do this?" And a huge rant. It was brilliant.
The false information that you get from something like ChatGPT tends to be when you ask ChatGPT an open question that it looks on the internet for. So can you tell me the life history of Napoleon or something like that? And it will say Napoleon went to Eton or something ridiculous. It will just. But if you paste 1,000-word, and I've an anonymous friend who I won't reveal had, I think, a 70,000-word report. And they needed to provide a summary, like a 1,000-word summary as a top piece. You paste a 70,000-word report into ChatGPT, it's not going to start trawling the internet. It's just going to focus on that report. And the 1,000-word summary it produced required a little bit of tidying and a few adjectives to be removed, but it was acceptable. And that would have taken half a day.
It's very specific tasks that it can be good for.
And the point there is kind of, you have to curate the AI if you want to get the results you want. So
you should curate AI,
Well, but to that extent, it's not so much replacing jobs as kind of streamlining them a bit.
Yeah.
And so it's a case of how carefully the industry manages that streamlining. So, for instance, your friend, he saved himself half a day, but it didn't cost himself a job. I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
So it's all about, it's a tool, and it's all about how you manage the tool.
Totally.
Let's talk about,
again, it's like anything, you need to regulate that tool, as Dylan was saying. That's the big conversation.
And that's what the BBC, this statement, I think, is part of the drive towards regulation control. So people say it's the start of the slippery slope. It's not the start of the slippery slope. The BBC's statement is the thing that's going to stop people sliding down the slippery slope in the first place.
Yeah, it's going off in another direction and finding us some steps with a nice handrail instead of a slippery slope, isn't it?
And it's important to, all the tech revolutions we've been promised in the last decade or so haven't really worked out. So I don't quite think it's going to be that threat or promise that we're kind of holding on to possibilities of at the moment.
The internet did all right.
That's 30
and
years
word
plus,
processors.
Matt.
Yeah, but I think
the last decade.
I think AI is closer to the development of the internet and word processors than it is to, I don't know, whatever.
It depends whether you believe the dead internet theory, though, doesn't it? And then maybe the internet didn't work out, and we're all bots.
Well, I am. I don't know about you guys.
And also Doctor Who kind of does thematically lend itself to AI, because if you look at Jerry Davis's scripts, pretty much as ChatGPT, tell me a story set in one place, give me a monster based on this or that.
It's Terry Nation's
ChatGPT
script writing
showing those
process,
up.
isn't it?
Terry Nation, yep. RTD a little bit.
Chat GDTD. Gary Davis and Terrence Dix, for those who didn't keep up with that. Right, let us move on. Otherwise, we won't get a chance to talk about Ian Levine.
Hooray!
Who wouldn't want to do that?
I don't want to talk about Ian Levine. I don't think that's fair. I'll tell you two reasons why I don't think that's fair. I mean, obviously, Ian Levine is quite the internet presence, and he's very forceful when it comes to trying to make sure these things get seen, and a bit rude with it on account of, you know, his mental state or whatever. But I think sometimes it's easy to misread him on the internet because he's a record producer. That's his job, always has been his job. And being pushy about things is how you get stuff done in that industry. So I think the fact that he comes on and behaves on public fora in the same way as he might behave behind the scenes doesn't really do him any favors, which is not to excuse him, of course. But what I'm saying is, if you think about it, there are reasons sometimes why he behaves the way he does, which doesn't excuse the behavior, like I said. But the other thing, B, while he's the spearhead for these things, it's not his work. It's the work of other people. And so I want to pay them the respect of treating this topic seriously rather than just having some slanging match on the internet and getting all like clickbaity in the way we talk about the stuff we're about to talk about. And what we're really talking about, I guess, is because Celestial Toymaker is sort of on the eve of its release. It's just a few weeks away as we're speaking. And that is quite the sort of diversion from the way they have been doing it for the BBC. And because Ian Levine and his crew, his team, whoever they are now putting out, or they finished and they've put out the first episode of this AI-generated Dalek Master Plan, I think this is an interesting juncture to talk about the way these things are going. Previously, the recons, for example, have been photographs that somebody's given moving mouths to, and sometimes they've shuffled the characters around inside a set in much the same way as those early BBC animations, the web animations in the late 90s and early 90s did. Death Comes to Time and so on, real time and that. So the early recons were very much in that sort of mode. This AI one that Ian Levine's put out is pushing that on. It might not be pushing it on as much as some people would like, but it pushes it on. And so I want to ask the three of you what you think of it. But for me, I get the ball rolling by saying, I don't think it's broadcastable. I don't think you could sell it commercially on a DVD or a Blu-ray or whatever. But what I will say is, for me, I've got the kind of brain, there's a word for this, but I can't remember what the word is, the kind of brain that if you listen to an audio, I quickly lose track of who the voices belong to and how they're all relating to one another. If you give me a recon, that's much better. But the fact that it's still photography still means that my brain will tune out, and then I find it hard to tune back in every now and again. I can watch recons like an episode at a time, as long as there's distance between them. Something like this, I think, is animated to enough of a degree that while it doesn't convince you that you're watching the episode or anything like it, what it's doing is the fact that it's in motion keeps my brain engaged with it. And the fact that there's enough animation in the characters, not to let you believe that they're real people, but to at least convince you of the fact that there had been real people doing that. Whereas the photographs, I don't think necessarily always work in that way, allows me to sort of visualize what the episode would have been in a way that I don't quite get to do with the recons, and the animations certainly don't, and the audio narrated without any pictures at all really doesn't. So for me, actually, in a funny way, this works best of all the different ways of doing it. I think there's a separate conversation about, well, should you just be watching something that makes you think about what the episode would have been? Or would you like to watch something like one of the animations that's actually an alternative to the episode, but does the job that the episode would have done? And I think actually, number one would be the alternative, the animation. But if I want something that makes me think, oh, this is how the episode would have been, then for me, this AI generated animation thing is probably the best of the bunch. So around the table then, what did you think of what you saw? How does it work? Is it dreadful? Is it the future? Are there things that can be tweaked about it that makes it work better? And so on and so forth. John, I'll come to you first since you came last time.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said there is it's the crux of what Ian has a problem with about this Toymaker animation. It's the almost the extreme of that approach that he doesn't like. He wants to see what was on the screen, or his memory of what was on the screen in 1965, 1966, whatever. I thought it's a good proof of concept. In the same way that Web was kind of a proof of concept for the Toymaker animation. It's very, very rough in places. You know, I think particularly there's when Brett Vine sat in the chair and his face just goes completely to the other guy's face. Just what the hell's going on?
And blinking, some of the blinking and stuff.
Yeah, I tell you, the faces are really odd.
And while we're on the subject, one of the things that kind of I found a bit tricky about this, and about a lot of the animations actually, and especially the amateur ones, but some of the professional ones too, when you speak, your jaw moves, the muscles in your face move. When you speak, the whole of your face moves. A lot of the time with the AI and even with the professional animations, when you speak, your lips move and everything else stays the same. And that is kind of a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, John, sorry.
It's what used to get away within the the animation of the 70s, 60s, 70s maybe. But we've moved on so much over 40, 50 years. You look at it and you'll accept it on a DVD because it's as good as you're going to get for that budget.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Budget.
Yeah. I think it lost a sense of place a couple of times for me, particularly when Brett's outside the TARDIS, and when Hartnell's going over to the Dalek City. But that might be an issue with the episode itself. Obviously we haven't seen to find out. But yeah, it's not in any way broadcast. But Ian, I think in the same way that, as you say, he oversells stuff. That's what he's doing here to try and get people to watch it.
Sure. I do suspect, though, that you could probably hand over this work to a professional company and get them to tweak it to the degree maybe where it still wouldn't be broadcastable, but where it'd be a lot closer to it, I guess.
Yeah.
Dylan, what did you think?
I mean, I think it's an enhanced recon, isn't it? It's not a replacement for the teleplay in a way that I think the animations are, because you're making a new production. I don't think it's... I mean, presumably the progress here is that they've fed in a series of prompts to a computer that has sort of done this stuff for them, which shows some promise. But it for me, it's no further advanced. There was a version of Daleks Master Plan 1, I think, done in like the 90s or something, where they made the pictures, the lips move, and they did like pan and scans on the graphics to sort of, make things move around. And it's not too far removed from that, except that it's not as labor intensive. It's, for me, if I think of it as enhanced recon, a fan recon at that, then yeah, I go with it. But it's a weird choice to use that episode. Like, I think I said in our group chats, like, I would pick something like Wheel in Space episode 1. It's got 2 characters, it's a couple of sets, it's got all the telesnaps, and you're animating from telesnaps, not from composite shots that have been made by somebody else 20 odd years ago.
It's his choice, isn't it? Because it's his favourite story.
Yeah. And the Massacre being his 3 favourite stories: the Dalek Master Plan, the Massacre, and one of the other ones from that season, Celestial Toymaker. I mean, he must be in heaven, right?
Yeah. And with his Edmund Blackadder in the
Dalek Master Plan, though. Are they not doing all 9 of the missing episodes?
Oh God, are they?
I thought so. I thought that was the impression I got. They've just put the first one out to let people know that this is what's happening, but the people... So what he does is he gets people to pay in a certain amount, like £100.
Yeah.
That goes to the animators or goes to paying for the rendering and so on. And those people get the whole thing, but the first episode's just gone out to say this is what we're up to, basically. That's as I understand it. I might be wrong.
I thought he hadn't finished the first one, so I mean, maybe he's jumped the gun. But that's a different conversation. What I will say is there is about 9 seconds of Power of the Daleks on YouTube that somebody did with AI, and it looks more like a Razorhead than Power of the Daleks, but you can tell the sort of prompts they're given. But what it does look like is a piece of 60s television in terms of the movement, in terms of the camera angles, in terms of the effects, and maybe that is, I'm not saying that that's the future because it was a very rough, weird thing, but it was like, I could see the potential in that for properly recreating missing episodes in a decade's time when we figured out how to sort of master that AI. But there's nothing here that's making me go, oh, this is the future of recreating missing episodes. I think AI in general shows some promise for the animation, and probably, you know, one of the things we'll talk about when we get to the Celestial Toymaker is perhaps sometimes there's lip sync issues and stuff like that. And I'm more interested in what the AI can do for the animated, the missing episode animations than I am in sort of a enhanced recon, I think.
2 things about this though that differentiate between this and those older recons is, one, the characters' heads are turning in 3 dimensions, not always convincingly, but they are doing it. And the other thing is those characters are also moving around within a 3-dimensional space, which the recons never were. They were shuffling them across. So, and again, not convincingly, but again, more convincingly. I mean, at least they're doing it. It's coming on. I guess I'm saying.
And there's been other fan animations in the past, haven't there, that have looked like computer games and stuff like that. So I guess it's sort of smashing those 2 things together a little bit. And I mean, I don't know how many people worked on it, how long it took them. That's what I'm actually more interested to know. It's like, how long did it take you to knock this up? Because if it was 20 minutes, then that's fantastic for 20 minutes work. I'm sure it was a lot longer than that, but that's sort of where my interest peaks, of like, okay, if we have actual designers and people working on this, and actual CG artists and animators and stuff, and technological experts who know how to program the AI, what are the capabilities then? Not really, you know, what are a bunch of Doctor Who fans doing with Daleks Master Plan episode 1?
I tell you what, though, I would watch the whole story like this, and I think I'd get more out of watching the whole story like this than any other means than a professional animation, probably. I'd certainly prefer this over a regular recon.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, yeah. Matt, what are your thoughts?
So there are two schools that seem to be battling when actually they work well together. There's the Ian Levine school, which wants to, as John says, recreate his childhood and produce a version of the episode that looks as close to the original episode as possible. And there's the other school that produces the Celestial Toymaker, which is what you get because Ian Levine's approach isn't good enough yet. It's just not good. It's not broadcastable. So you might as well go with the Celestial Toymaker approach. But for me, they're not in opposition to one another. They're both advancing bits of technology in the right direction. And I think ultimately we will get reconstructions of the original episodes that look pretty convincingly like 1960s television without the flaws. It's just a matter of advancing technology, and I don't think AI is going to need to advance that much further. It looks like Levine's team took the still images and applied AI to it.
Didn't they take the recon and
Yeah.
just that? Yeah.
Whereas if you think about, if you take all of Hartnell's episodes, the moving images of all of Hartnell's episodes, at some point you'll be able to feed those into AI and the telesnaps and the script. And at some point, motion capture actual people. So there was that school that did a fairly decent recreation of Mission to the Unknown.
Yeah.
And that's a school doing it, and it was
the University of Central Lancashire.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it was watchable.
Not a primary school.
Yeah.
No, but it was. But
Oh
it was,
God, can we do Celestial Toymaker with primary school kids,
That was
please?
fantastic.
But my point is that was watchable.
Yeah.
But there are all of these disparate bits of technology being used in different directions. But actually, if you brought them all together at some point in the not too distant future, then you could end up with something that looks pretty much like Daleks Master Plan episode 1. I think the problem is Ian Levine thinks he's got there already because he's impatient and he's really passionate about what he and his team produces. So he's a little bit blind to its flaws, and he thinks everything he produces, it sounds like he thinks, is something the BBC should put on BBC One prime time. And it's not, but everything he does is advancing the technology. It's advancing it slightly further. So it's a positive. And I've watched bits of this. Personally, I still quite like the audio, just the pure audio of Daleks Master Plan, because I don't have JR's brain. So I followed that. Quite happily walking to work and back. Yeah. I mean, it's not a But I don't have a problem with that. I'm looking forward to the Celestial Toymaker because it looks interesting, and you guys have given positive reviews of it. But I have sympathy for Levine's position that I want to see. I'm not a purist, but I'd like to see the Daleks Master Plan as close to its original state as possible.
Well, to this effect, on the Blu-rays now, the DVDs as well, I guess, you get the animated version and you get a recon. And generally speaking, they're quite good recons. Obviously, they can't do what Loose Cannon did and use photographs that aren't BBC copyright. So they don't go down that route. But they're pretty good recons, really. And you get both things on there. I guess what you're saying, Matt, and me as well in the private thread, I said this too, is in an ideal world, you would buy, say, a DVD of The Massacre, a Blu-ray of The Massacre, and you'd have a really lovely animation that's not beholden to the camera script. And you'd have a really lovely AI reconstruction that is beholden to the camera script, so that you could effectively either watch it as it had been in a way that's less than ideal, but gives you an impression of what it would have been, or you can watch the professional sort of animation that reconstructs the story without being so beholden to those things. So, I mean, that's the ideal world.
I think it would be nice. I think ultimately, I do genuinely believe that it will get to the stage where the reconstruction is so good that the animations will be obsolete. There'd be no point in producing an animation of a story where you've got basically the black and white story, the story in existence.
Yeah, maybe
it would get to that level of quality, and then the animations would become like a quirky kind of, oh, remember when we got animations for the massacre? Look at this anime. This is weird. Look at the invasion.
That's going to kind of depend on the visual material available. You know, some have telesnaps, some don't. So
yeah,
I think the approach is going to be there for all of it. It just depends on what suits the story.
But that's when. But then you could have the plans for the sets. You'd have photographs generally of sets. Then you just get people dressed in costumes with golf balls on their head or whatever. And to be honest, I'm not an expert in the technology. I'm just seeing how the technology has advanced in the last year, and I've seen what Peter Jackson can do with motion capture and what they do with the Star Wars series.
Right, because somebody shut Matt up, because we're overrunning already and we haven't talked about the Celestial Toymaker yet.
That's because I haven't seen it. What's the point?
So, well, you and I, very briefly then, Matt, Celestial Toymaker, they've completely gone off camera script and done something that's very kind of subjective and different. I quite like the idea of that. So far, all I've seen, obviously, is the trailer. I quite like the idea of that because I don't think it's a very good story anyway.
No, it's a story that if they recovered the episodes, I'd still probably want to watch the animation for this one because it's just more interesting.
Exactly. So this is not a case of them trying to reconstruct the story, but of them taking the soundtrack and making something that you can watch and enjoy in its own right, but actually is formed out of the soundtrack rather than being beholden to it. But Dylan and John have seen it or part of it. So in a minute, I'm going to ask John what he thought of the whole thing. But first, I don't want to know what Dylan thought of it. I just want to know why he missed 3 episodes.
Well, I was late, basically. I was late, and then so we got there for episode 3, and I wasn't going to watch episode 4 because I've seen it many times, and it doesn't matter what they do to it, it'll still be rubbish. So that's why I only saw episode.
So you went all the way to the BFI for one episode.
Well, no,
22 minutes.
I went to hang out with John as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You got the social bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to talk to some other Doctor Who fans as well.
One day I will go along to these things. I'm pretty close.
I've got to ask a question though, Dylan. Was Ian Levine there?
He was, yeah. I saw him wandering around the bar. I didn't, as far as I know, he didn't ask any awkward questions or anything like that.
No.
Did he go in and watch it?
Yes, he was in the front row.
Wow,
he has a seat in the front row when he's in for his wheelchair.
Could you see him slowly inflate as he sat there?
Yeah. It's like Mr. Creosote in photo screen, like a puffer fish. So I missed the last 2 episodes as well for
that. John, I'll ask you in a second, but Dylan, what did you think of what you saw?
I thought it was imperfect, but pretty good. Like there was some. I mean, they did say we weren't seeing the final version. There are some lip sync issues, but episode 3 is essentially Dodo and Stephen looking for a key in a kitchen, and the fact that they've made that visually interesting, I take my hat off to them. It's like it's remarkable in that respect that I wasn't bored shitless. So they've taken a lot of liberties. It's exactly the story that you would choose to take a lot of liberties with, just because it's an out there weird. If the Mind Robber was missing, it'd have a recon like this. So it's the perfect one to do it with. But then for me, the animations, they can do what they want as long as they keep me entertained, which some of them do and some of them don't.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with that. John, then finally we come to you. You saw all 4 episodes, right?
I did. Yep.
And what did you think of it?
I'm with Dylan. I don't mind what they do to the animation as long as it's kind of sympathetic to the story. So we had something like the Macra Terror. It's quite subtly done. It's or they maybe increase the size of the Macra. They improve what sets would have been. This one, they can go off the wall with it, and they pretty much do. I think what they without wanting to spoil it, there's obviously the original was limited by the fact that it's actors, the technology of the time. This, it plays with scale, it plays with the nature of the characters, it plays with the nature of the Toymaker's realm, and it makes, again, something I've always found a quite dull story. It should be the Doctor meets God should not be this dull a story. and it makes it, you're always looking that there'll be something happening. And Dill's absolutely spot on. The technique still isn't quite there. It's still got some of the issues, not quite as badly as the Dalek Master Plan one has, but it still has that issue with the face. Some of the faces don't move when the mouth moves. So there will be people who have that problem with that. It's one of those. If I can see why Ian Levine had a problem with it, because he, as we said, he has that kind of purist position. And this is the exact opposite of it. So I understand it. I just don't agree with him that where he said all of Doctor Who fandom is outraged with this.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because it was chatting in the bar afterwards with those. It's almost entirely positive from what they've done for it.
Well, and you've got 4 people here, and admittedly only one of us has seen all 4 episodes, but I think all 4 of us are on board with it.
No,
but then I guess to round things out, this is kind of the point, isn't it? All 4 of us are on board with them doing something different, and all 4 of us would be on board with them reconstructing the original as long as they could do so convincingly and successfully, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I think the point is keep an open mind and don't shut any doors.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Star Wars where George Lucas wants to remake it and then
bin the originals. Yeah.
Bin the originals totally because of what he couldn't do.
Stable Doors kind of shot on that one already, hasn't it?
BBC have made that choice for you.
I mean, if we could just get Peter Jackson off his obsession with the Beatles and back onto his obsession with Doctor Who.
How much more Beatles has he got to do? Come on.
Exactly. Surely, the things he could do, Levine like with Doctor Who.
I'm just waiting for the day somebody interviews him and he says, "Yeah, I remember from when I was a kid. My favourite story was always the one with the pirates." Come on. Hey, Dylan, sorry, I cut you off.
The space pirates.
Not those pirates. No, I'd take that.
I've completely forgotten what I was going to say, but I'm sure it was very witty.
Whereas the other three of us can confirm to you absolutely that it wasn't.
I tell you what I can say is that to round things up and bring all these things together is I interviewed Ian Levine for a book recently, and I used AI to transcribe the interview afterwards. So if that isn't a meeting of worlds, you know, there's a Jerry Springer final thoughts in there somewhere.
The thematic beauty of that to finish on.
In that case, let's call it a night. We'll come back and do more news as and when we get some news about the new series. Presumably quite soon now. You would think it's only a couple of months.
Well, there's something happening tomorrow, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Is there? Well, we'll be back. I'm going to be in Southampton tomorrow, so we might have to come back on Saturday and talk about that. Until we do that, then, I was JR.
I was Matt.
I was Dylan.
And I was John.
And we will speak again soon. What's happening tomorrow, then?
What's happening tomorrow?
Russell T Davies